day to everyone who's watching. My name is Farida. I am the CEO and co-founder of Empower. Empower is an inclusive framework platform which actually helps organizations work inclusively, efficiently, and effectively with neurodiverse talent. My own background is I'm an economist by education, a banker by profession, and perhaps today an entrepreneur by passion. This is my fourth venture, and this is the first venture where commercial takes a second place, and it is something which is very close to my heart. Happy to be here and lovely to be talking to my co-panelist Ayon. Hi Ayon.
Hey Farida, thanks. A very good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to our viewers, whichever part of the world you are tuning in from. Thank you, DLC team, for having us on the show. It's indeed a great pleasure. My name is Ayon Banerjee. In my day job, I lead the Asia Pacific region for a GE business. Outside of that, I'm a husband, a father, a fitness enthusiast, and an author. I am super excited to be on this chat show today with my eminent co-panelist, Farida, and I really look forward to a very insightful discussion. And a quick disclaimer before we begin, I'll be speaking today in my personal capacity, my views not necessarily reflecting that of the organization I work for. So it's a personal, kind of viewpoint. So without much further ado, let me move to the first question to Farida. So Farida, it just cannot get more relevant than this to have a champion on diversity and inclusion like yourself on this chat. So let's start with the obvious first question, given all the drive around inclusive hiring these days, would you say that inclusion makes for a mere CSR box tick, or does it really have a compelling business case for organizations? So as an expert, what's your view on that?
Firstly, thank you for this question, because this is a very, very important thing. And the problem is that we get asked often, is it a CSR initiative or is it a business case? I say that inclusion is always a business case. It is not a CSR initiative. If you look at the world, 20 to 25% of the world comes under PWDs, persons with disabilities, of which a certain percentage is, physically differently abled. A certain percentage has different, mentally differently abled. So the thing is that your customers, if you are an organization, your clients, your customers are also going to have a construct where 20% to 25% of your customers are also going to be part of the PWDs and the constructs within that. So when you design products, you have to keep in mind that audience as well. Therefore, when you as an organization start becoming inclusive, it is not a CSR initiative because you are getting value. And also, the PWDs are actually an untapped, underrepresented group. It's an untapped talent pool. With some accommodations, every organization today is able to actually get the value that they would from anyone else, even from people who are marginalized. So coming back to your point, it is not a CSR initiative. It's always a business case.
Thanks for the answer. I mean, that kind of validates what I also think of it as. So thank you. Thank you.
Well, that brings me to my question to you, Ayon, that you are someone at the other side of the table and someone who's actually worked in multiple cultures. And then I have the privilege of talking to someone who's written 3 books. So let me ask you, do organizations take D&I seriously?
We have really come a long way as a business ecosystem from where we were 10, 15 years back, when diversity and inclusion were hardly, known words or phrases in organizations. Today, most organizations, big, small, whether they are local or multinationals, they take it very seriously. So that's where we have come a long way. Now let's step back into the backdrop. So we are all different from each other, right? In terms of gender, color, faith, age, orientation, everything. And then we are all huddled together in a global workforce, global yet local workforce, where we are supposed to exhibit homogeneous behavior to meet common objectives. And that's where it starts getting tricky, because we we are all aware of the isms like racism, sexism, blah, blah, and we know it. And we have names and shames for all these isms that exist in workplaces today. But the problem is, the noble as all this sounds, sometimes it leads to box ticking by certain organizations, where we've all seen those photo ops, right, in Twitter or Instagram, with coordinated images, where companies pretend to be champions of inclusion and diversity, but in reality they actually aren't. So that's a gap that leadership and organizations need to fix. And the second paradox I have noticed is that we have, this is almost a cliche these days, that we have these we say that we have a diversity candidate per se. So diversity candidate, all is fine as long as talent and diversity goes hand in hand. But sometimes we see that the real talented candidates from the diversity pool probably don't get the right options or opportunities, whereas the ones who actually end up getting the advantages are the ones who play the visibility card better. So that's another kind of gap which we as leaders and organizations need to fix. And most large organizations have understood this and they are fixing it. Most big organizations are very conscious about it. And lastly, the worst offenders, as I call them, they are the pretenders. They are the people who pretend to be a great champions of the slogans, but in real life they don't practice it. So if you talk of a meritocracy where the best men and women from all fringes rise to the top and they set the culture, in a kakistocracy, which is the opposite of a meritocracy, where the rule of the worst, where there is virtue signaling, and virtue signaling becomes a hiding place for ineffective leaders. I think we need to call them out, and that's a choice, but a very important one, because that's what is going to take us from where we've come today. And we've come a long way, as I mentioned in the beginning, but we need to go from here to improving our say-do ratio, because we have the templates and the boxes and all the intent in place. Now we need to demonstrate the right intent in implementing that. So I think that's a very candid and a brutal view probably, but I think that's where we need to be.
Thanks, Ayon. I would actually like to add to this. So I have been in the diversity and inclusion space now for almost 10 years. When I started working in this space, and it is personal to me because being a woman of color, being an entrepreneur, and sitting in a room with all white male colleagues has been very difficult. So when I started working in this space, it was more about gender parity. And that was important because, as you see, when you are studying, you are at the same level. When you are 25, you are at the same level. But slowly, when you are 28, 29, women start growing much slower than their male counterparts because they take time off for raising a family, and somewhere there's a perception that if she has a family, then she might not want to kind of go all out in work, etc. So when you are at that cusp of 35, 36, the men in the organization have risen much faster than the women. That is, and then when you actually reach the board level, there are fewer women even then, because that number keeps declining. So this was the first thing that I started doing when I started working in the diversity and inclusion area. But slowly there were other things which started getting added. So you started talking about first you address the gender bias, then ageism, ethnicity, LGBTQ, and so on. PWD was the last part, and the area that I work in, neurodiversity, is a much, much, much smaller segment of that entire, area. But the thing is, having said that, today inclusion looks a lot better. Diversity was always an agenda, but inclusion was not so prominent. So it's like getting invited to a dinner party, which is diversity, and enjoying the dinner, making sure everyone is enjoying the dinner is inclusion. And I do see that a lot happening, and it's actually heartwarming because the number of women in a room when I walk into an investor pitch, or I walk into areas which was in the past dominated by men mostly, I do see a lot of women, which is actually quite heartwarming. But still we are far from having that level playing field for everyone. But yes, I mean, large organizations want to make sure that they are perceived as inclusive, and they are doing everything which will probably, it's a start, it will take them there.
Absolutely fantastic. That's a great perspective you gave me, especially about the ages which you mentioned. And I never thought of it that way, but that kind of like puts up a light bulb in my head. I understand now, kind of the whole big picture. So thanks for that. So let me give you the next question, Farida. So let's talk about talent. For example, you are obviously someone who deals with a lot of diverse talent and positions them with companies. So we hear a lot about the war for talent in today's connected economy. How can we win this war? By exploring the untapped talent pool that you just spoke about. So what's your view on that?
I'll try to kind of, address this in a slightly longish manner, because let's just take a step back. The war for talent is real, because what has happened is COVID somehow gave a tailwind to people having more opportunities. Now, the thing is, the war for talent is very real, because today, COVID has actually proven that, because within a month, most organizations were up and running virtually, because you just didn't have a choice. And sometimes infrastructure comes into play very, very quickly. It's difficult to build brick and mortar. So digital infrastructure is a lot easier to implement. So if you look at countries like Nigeria, for instance, they've had like a huge infrastructure boost where everyone became a smartphone savvy. You look at countries like Philippines, everyone started using smartphones because they didn't have a choice. But what also happened is that this gave opportunity to people who could start contributing even working from home. For instance, one marginalized group was women who had families to take care of and couldn't really go all out. It gave them an opportunity to start working from home and start contributing. So what also happened is, when you talk about war for talent, people started getting a lot more opportunity. Now, when there is opportunity, there are choices. So if you look at, for instance, say technology hubs like India, uh, specifically, places say like Bangalore, each technology guru, or, somebody who considers themselves, a technology expert, 8 years of experience, is sitting on 2.5 offers minimum.
Really? Really?
And
Wow.
yes, and what really happens is that they start, really moving around, and there are only that many people. So there is a musical chair that keeps going on, and these are the same people who keep moving. So the war for talent is real. If you look at the Bay Area, a full stack engineer is easily receiving 5 calls from a headhunter in a week. If they choose to kind of attend to 2 or 3 of those calls and take one interview request, they do have offers, and they take the one that works for them the best. So what really is happening is, people who are marginalized, that's an untapped talent pool. And when you talk about winning the war for talent, with some accommodations, organizations can actually get a good value out of that untapped talent pool. For instance, it's very easy to create accommodations for things you can visually see. Have a ramp for the wheelchair, provide audio devices for people who are, challenged in that, in that particular sense, or, sensory needs, etc. What is difficult is to include people who are wired differently, the neurodiverse. That is a huge pool. They look like anybody else in the room, but they need accommodations in the workplace. For instance, it's like two differently wired systems. One is a Mac and one is a Windows. They are both designed to give you the best technology, but in really, really different ways. So there is that gap. So the thing is, for organizations, if they make accommodations, one, at an organizational level, they are able to bring in people. But what happens then? After that, sensitizing, educating, and empowering the neurotypicals, or people who are not differently abled, to work better with the people who are differently abled, because there is going to be a gap. The awareness is very recent, and once they are in the organization, you don't know how to engage with them. So I think for organizations, it is key to start educating and sensitizing. That's a start. And every person is going to require a different type of accommodation. So there is no cookie cutter approach. There is no one size fits all. So that education is very important for organizations to start tapping into this talent pool. Winning the war, is the next step.
Very, very insightful. Very insightful. Thank you. Thanks. I think that's very insightful indeed.
One of the things
Thank you.
which actually, comes to my mind, Ayon, when I am actually talking to you, and probably you see this as well, we hear a lot about quiet quitting these days, right? And after the COVID years, and I just talked about it, that war for talent and everything, but things have changed. And there is so much that is happening within organizations, and these 2 years of COVID have completely changed the entire scenario, right? So if we just take like a step back, what would you say defines happiness at work? Because that syntax has changed completely. The syntax has changed and the definition has changed. So let me ask you, because I talk to a lot of leaders and everyone has a different perspective. And since you sit across and deal with the whole region, I'm sure your team tells you different things as well. So let's hear what you think.
Sure. It's quiet quitting. It's the elephant in the room. It's the most pertinent topic these days. So yeah. So before I get to the topic and before we get to happiness, I'm sure we'll talk about happiness as we go ahead. Let me share a quick anecdote. Many years back, about 12 years back, I guess, I had once asked Mr. Jeff Immelt, who was then the chairman of GE, that during a town hall, that Mr. Immelt, why do you think that good performers quit? So without batting an eyelid, Mr. Immelt instantly replied, because they are bored. And I think, that nothing much has changed in the crux of that matter. Even today, people, the youngsters, your talented workforce, they quit your organization not because they're overworked or they are asked to do long hours, but because they are not engaged enough. They are bored with the work. So I think that's not changed across the years. You might have followed a furor on social media recently where two leaders were faced a lot of flack for making some comments on youngsters needing to do more hours, etc., because these are the formative years, like a boot camp, and you should not whine and just put in the dumb hours. And while with full respect, I know that probably these leaders made the comments with the best of intent, but the way the comments landed, it was probably not palatable, and that's the reason for the flack. And I'll tell you something, because I am probably someone from the other side of the spectrum as far as the age of the workforce is concerned. But even despite that, I empathize with the younger population today, because as a youngster myself, I have done those 16, 17-hour work days, okay? But it was a different world. And today we are dealing with a different workforce that has grown up in a different world. So this workforce is extremely different from what it was 20 years back. This is far more diligent, well-informed. It's a connected world. They have an inbuilt sense of accountability and professionalism inside them, which we didn't have because we had a lot of other, things to deal with. And so these youngsters, when they come into the workforce, they have that by default, and just asking them for more hours is probably not the right thing. What we need to do is give them, and we need to enrich their job content instead. Why do you need these youngsters for 18-hour days? Because you want them to do your dumb work, you want them to do your PowerPoints, you want them to do your Excel spreadsheets, which you will use for your review meetings with your bosses and your leadership. Instead of doing that, why don't you invite the same youngster who did your PowerPoint inside the same meeting, and then you ask them to co-present it with you? That's how you build engagement. Sometimes sit with them, listen to their aspirations, their dreams, and ask them for their ideas and implement some of those ideas. I can tell you from experience, some of the millennials and some leadership gurus call them entitled, but I am completely against that notion. I think that the millennials and this generation is far more smarter than what at least I was, and I sometimes take their ideas, and they're wonderful ideas. So, and lastly, this might sound a little judgmental, but and harsh, but instead of auditing your young work population for their working hours, why don't you audit your visceral fat that is hidden in your mid management? We have so much of visceral fat sitting inside the layers of middle management, men and women who are extremely ineffective, who do nothing to the bottom line, and who get away scot-free doing that. And we get these poor youngsters to do 18-hour days and to do the dumb work. I mean, I think that's where we need to correct it as leaders in organizations. We need to enrich and get them more engaged. And that's what is going to probably end quiet quitting. I think quiet quitting is nothing has changed. They are just bored. That's all.
I so agree with you. I actually want to give you a virtual high five right now because you just said it. And I mean, I have been through that as well. So I started my career with HSBC, and I actually told my boss once that, you know, instead of telling me to make one more PowerPoint, throw me from the 23rd floor because I don't think I can, make one more PowerPoint. So I kind of get that, and this is like back in 2001 when I was just an intern, and I was actually scared that I may never get a job. So this is like that many years back, but I said just throw me from the 23rd floor. I don't think I can make one more PowerPoint presentation. So I so kind of, I can kind of go back in time and think of that. But this is so true because nothing has changed. This 17, 18 hours we did in our time, and the new youngsters, the new young adults who are coming into workforce, in a lot of organizations they still do it. But the only good part is that the young people today, they have choices. That's why this quiet quitting has actually become a lot more prominent. Because maybe, Ayon, when you and I started our careers, we didn't have so many choices. You get picked up from the campus and you hold on to that choice. And I graduated in the worst possible year ever, 2001, with the dot-com bust and everything. So, and as a young 20-year-old, you are really scared. I didn't even want to go and do my MBA. I just wanted to get a job. So I think we had that fear and we didn't have so many choices. But today's generation, they have choices. If they don't want to do a job, they can freelance. If they don't want to freelance, they have a YouTube channel. They can do so many things, right?
True, true, very true, very true, very true. And that kind of gets me to your what you just said. Yeah, you have come a long way from, like you said, you have done a number of stints, you worked, and now your work is beyond being just a career. It's more of a calling for you now. So your work obviously has a far reaching impact beyond merely bringing linear efficiency to the workforce. So why don't you tell us how inclusion at the workplace can bring forth a huge positive impact on society as a whole, and in terms of contribution that you are making to the society today, Farida?
I think, on a serious note, inclusion is a huge social impact. When you talk about, even if you say 20% of the world is not included today, yeah, 20% of the world of people who can actually contribute to the workforce are not included in the workforce. If you actually take a Big Mac index and you look at each of this individual being able to earn equivalent of 18,000 USD in a year, think of the billions of dollars of social impact it has. Because work is a very important part of anyone's life. It is important for the individual, it's important for the family, it's important for the society, it's important for the country, and it's important for the world. So inclusion definitely is a very, very serious thing, because if inclusion doesn't happen, that much of opportunity is lost. That much of brain drain has already happened without even coming into the workforce. That much of collective intelligence is not tapped. So it's a huge, huge impact. You know, there is a lot of talk around diversity and inclusion, but it is actually not just diversity inclusion, but it is DEI. So you talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, being able to bring diversity into your workplaces, being able to bring inclusion into the workplaces, and everyone having a voice at that table is also important. Because that, and if you actually speak to a lot of people, they would say they want to work for an organization which is inclusive. They want to work for organization where their voice is heard. And today's generation is very well informed compared to us. I mean, we probably, millennials, we were informed, but not as much as the people, the young generation is now informed, because they have access to so much information, more than what we had. So they are extremely conscious as to where they are engaging and which organization they work for. And if their voice is not heard, the disengagement starts then. So inclusion is not only important from an organizational perspective, but it's also a social impact. It's a huge social impact. And it is necessary because even your customers, like I mentioned before, they are also part of that construct of the world, right? So every organization, if they already take the initiative, but instead of just making it a tick box, it has to be part of their strategy. It has to be part of their growth. And it is not a CSR initiative. I always actually put it in quotes that it's not a CSR initiative. It is a business case. You don't, you know, just let a certain talent pool be and say, I don't have people to hire, I cannot hire people, because you are just not tapping enough of that talent pool.
True, true, true. Very true.
Um, this actually brings me to a question for you, Ayon, and I'm very curious. We talk about social impact. Everyone is, trying to do our bit, and you have actually written 3 books, and this is over and above your day job. What motivates you? And what keeps you going to do these things outside, because you are a family man, you have your own commitments, and it is not easy to find time. I am still actually in midst of my first book for the last 3 years, so I am really motivated and I want to know what drives you.
Thanks for the kind comment, Farida. I agree. Yeah, I wrote 3 books. I published 3 books in the last 3 years. So it was partially to do with the great pause that we were all subjected to due to the pandemic. So we were traveling less. We were not traveling actually. We were at home, mostly at home, and we were getting no time wasted for commutes, etc. So we had more time to reflect, get within ourselves, and introspect into our deeper selves. And to see what's around us for a while outside of the chatter. And what I realized was that we Indians are not very good in terms of documenting our journeys and our heroes. I mean, yes, we do have the great Indian names these days that make news. That we hear of Satya Nadella, Indra Nui, Sundar Pichai, and all the great men and women who are doing us proud in the world. But if you look at how India is perceived by the rest of the world, it's a very binary narrative. Like we Indians are, India is either perceived as a land where which produces Nobel laureates who teach at Harvard, or it's a land of dabbawalas that are studied by Harvard. India is either a land of Mahatma Gandhi and Taj Mahal, or it's a land where you can't trust the drinking water and where cows sit on the street. So we are always perceived as a country with these extreme boxes. We are perceived in these boxes. And I strongly believe that there is a different India which resides in between these boxes. And that's the real India, where, I often use this phrase that there 500 million people wake up every morning without a guarantee on the bread for the day, but they end the day with a dream in their eyes. These are the same men and women who stand on one foot in a crammed railway compartment, and they are probably ones who get to office on time, and they write the software that forms the backbone of the Fortune 100 organizations. So I try to observe these every men and every women. So I try to see who is this every man in the subway, who is this business traveler at the boarding gate of an airport, who is the salesperson sitting at a reception of an office, or who is that faceless participant inside those endless calls that we keep participating in. So who are these people? What are their triggers? What motivates them? What makes them tick? So I try to dig out their stories and cheer for them, because I think that somebody needs to tell their stories, and I am their cheerleader. So my books are very humble. They are very simple stories, standalone articles about these every men and every women, and all these stories are sitting on overlapping boundaries of work and life, because I strongly believe that work and life are not two watertight compartments. I think they have overlaps, and we should not act like robots, as if there's an umbrella which we leave outside when we enter work. Life is an umbrella we leave outside, or vice versa. I mean, I think they overlap, and I think that's how the books came about, basically. So yeah, nothing great, but I tried to document them. That's all.
I could keep listening to you. You are so articulate. No wonder you are an author. Because
No,
the way you talk, I just don't want you to stop. I want you to keep talking. It's such a
that's
pleasure listening to you.
so kind of you. Thank you. Thank you, Farida. So, while, we just spoke of social impact and everything else. So somebody like you who has been so successful at your work, that addresses such a critical issue of today's professional world. And I say this, I mean this, not because we are on this show, because the way you explained everything, it's really put up a lot of light bulbs in my head. And I see things from a different perspective today. So if we ask you about the big picture, how much progress do you think that we are making as a global society at large in terms of creating a level playing field at work? As an expert, what's your view on where we are today?
So, I started on this journey in 2020, and then it became my full-time job. Now, if I were to actually, kind of look at the journey that I have had and the observations that I have made during this time, I think creating a level playing field in the workplace, we are making progress, but we are not there as yet. In fact, on Thursday, I spoke at the Economist Impact, workplace. It's basically a forum, which is, it was a 3-day program, and I was on one of the panels. And this was the same question that was asked: that do you think it's a level playing field? No, we are getting there. It is not a level playing field, but what has happened because of everything that has happened in digitization, infrastructure becoming really really available to everyone, people have started getting opportunities. We might get to a stage in some years where it will be a level playing field, but my wish is, and this is a hope, and I do hope that I can see it in my lifetime, we don't have to have these conversations. It should be the norm. The day we don't have these conversations about diversity and inclusion, and it should be part of our fabric, is what my aspiration is, dream is. So I to answer your question, no, the playing field is not leveled as yet. I see it in every aspect. I see it when I'm raising funds. When I wanted to raise my when I wanted to raise my first round, I saw it then. My male counterparts who had much inferior products, not even at the stage that I was, could raise funds much faster than I could. So that field is not a level playing field. But when I raised my second round, it was a little easier, so it was getting better. So I think we are getting there, but no, there is a lot that needs to be done in terms of gender parity, in terms of inclusion, in terms of having opportunities available to everyone. And we will get there, but I think that will only happen slowly when everyone does their bit. And it's but dreaming is free, so you can keep
No,
on dreaming.
but kudos to you, people like you who have made this journey easier for the next generation which is going to come in there. And as you said, it's you, from your first round to your second round, it became easier. So that's probably a resultant of your efforts. So full marks to people like you, and salute to leaders like yourself. So great job. And thank you for doing that for the society.
It means a lot, because often we say that I want to leave a good world behind for my child, but I'm also thinking I want to leave a good child for the world. So I want to,
Wow.
basically do something that my child makes the world a better place, right? So that is my aspiration. And I think personally, it's very important to me that the work that I am doing empowers others.
Very
If
well
I
put.
want to be remembered, so I am very much a fan of Jack Ma, where I would say that I want to be remembered as a person who empowered others,
Very
because
well.
that's something you can kind of give to the next generation. This actually brings me to a question for you, Ayon. We often hear about work-life debate these days, and would you have any advice for the younger generation? What would you tell them so they have a work-life balance and a productive personal and professional life?
Yeah, work-life balance is a very interesting phrase. It's one of my favorite phrases and makes me smile every time because, like I said, I don't consider work and life to be umbrellas that need to be kept out when you enter one and leave the other. So they are very overlapping in terms of each other. Now, coming to this whole debate on work-life balance, I think most of what we call as work is basically a series of tasks. It is not work. So what is task? So we do emails, we schedule time for emails, for meetings, for travel, for gym, going to the gym, doing sports, blah blah blah. So if you introspect a little bit, you will see that these are not work. These are actually interruptions to work. So we actually schedule for interruptions and we try to push the work inside the gaps, whereas it should be the other way around. So I think the first thing we should look at is how we can put the work as primary and we can plug in the interruptions in the gaps. Sometimes we live in a very self-aggrandizing world these days. Everybody is about the big me. I have done this, I am this, I am that. Sometimes once in a week, get outside of yourself and cheer for someone else. That leaves you with a better feeling at the end of the day when you head back home to yourself. Uh, Another favorite of mine, this is a personal practice of mine, is that I try once a week, I try to debate from two sides of the same subject. What happens is it opens your mind because we live in a very polarizing world and that creates a lot of stress because everything is an us versus them discourse for us these days. We need to win every argument. We need to win that email fight. Sometimes it's not necessary. You just walk back, think from the other person's point of view, and it gives you a sense of calm and it frees you up for the evening. And I love doing this and it helps. I tell my younger friends to do that. And one more thing is that we get also, there is a classic placebo which we get trapped into, is to-do lists. We write a long list of items to be done and we keep striking them up through the day, and at the end of the day we are still surprised that why are we not feeling that sense of high, it's despite doing so much. That the reason being that to-do lists are basically a time waster, because I think we all instinctively know what are our priorities. Instead of a to-do list, if we do the work and then put a have done list in place, it kind of generates more endorphins, I feel, and it makes you feel better at the end of the day. So these are small hacks which I try. And lastly, I am a salesperson, so I have a very stressful work day, but I try to have an unwind button at night every evening, and a reset button every morning. So unwind button is which takes you off the grind, and reset button is which gets you back in the game. So my buttons are writing and working out. Your buttons could be different. It could be painting, or it could be listening to music or singing or whatever, but you need to figure out those buttons. And lastly, you should never stop telling your story. I feel not an exaggerated story, but in the digital ecosystem that we live today, everybody is selling himself or herself in some way or the other, subtly or not so subtly. And people, if you are invisible, it can create a lot of stress for yourself. You will feel that I'm left behind. So never stop telling your story. Tell the good things that you are doing, and there's no shame in doing that. So I think these are some of the regular hacks that we can employ, and we'll not feel that work and life are different planets. They are one and the same, and we can enjoy both together.
How amazing. I'm going to plagiarize some of this. I'm going to talk to people about it.
You're most welcome. Most welcome. Please.
But I think, Ayon, this is so important. And, a lot of this information we already know. But when someone puts it in the way that you have put it, actually kind of, helps you. Because I realize that, yes, we get stuck in to-do list. And there are so many of our young friends who get stuck in their to-do list, right? Because it never gets completed. And you never feel that sense of fulfillment. So every evening, if you feel fatigued, then probably you are doing a to-do list. I'm going to change it now to have done list. And
That's such a very nice of you. Thank you.
diverse and inclusive world is better for everyone. Do your bit. If there is anything that you think I can help, find me on LinkedIn, connect with me. My name is Farida Charania. And it need not just be work, but if there is anything that I can personally help, I'll be happy to do so. Inclusion is very, very close to my heart. And like I said, I am available. I will make time.
My only message would be probably, as what I took away from your piece of it, is that we need to get to the next stage of inclusion and diversity, like you said, that we are still work in progress as a business community. And we've come a long way, that's true. But we now need to push the boundaries further, where there are no fringes left, and everybody has an access. And like a meritocracy and a kakistocracy, right? In a kakistocracy, the worst rule of the worst. So we don't want a kakistocracy. We want meritocracies everywhere. So let's build that, and let's tap into that untapped reservoir of human potential that exists out there, and not just get stuck into specific boxes.
Thank you very much. Thank you, DLC team. It's been a pleasure, and thank you again, Ayon. It's been such a pleasure talking to you.
Likewise, Farida. Thank you so much. Thank you, DLC, and thanks to all viewers who will tune in and listen to this. So thanks for this opportunity. Thank you very much.